from Nashville, Tennessee. It's time for another episode of Tips, Tactics, and Tools for a Safer Tomorrow, where all things related to your safety and security are discussed, detailed, and delivered to you. You may leave with a tip that saves you money or a tactic that saves your life. So here are your hosts, owner and founder of Defense Systems, Brink Fiddler, and owner and operator of Herring Technology, Tom Herring.
Hey guys, welcome to this edition of Tips, Tactics, and Tools for a Safer Tomorrow. My name is Brink Fiddler, owner and founder of Defense Systems. With me as always is my co-host and founder of this podcast, Tom Herring, owner and operator of Herring Technology. This podcast is about all things related to safety and security, whether that is technology, events, or tips that can help you just in everyday life. We like to have guests on to talk about specific events, so we are really honored to have with us today Sean O'Brien, who is currently the chief of police at UT Chattanooga. But Sean was also formerly with Chattanooga PD and was very involved in the active shooter attack that took place in Chattanooga in July of 2015. So we're going to talk about that for just a little bit as well. But Sean, thanks for being here.
No, thank you. And always love coming up to Nashville. Big Preds fan.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Well, and it's a pretty easy jaunt from Chattanooga, too. So Sean and I got connected, interestingly enough. A lot of you all may know, depends on who listens to this, but one thing we do quite a bit is a 2-day tactical emergency casualty care course, which is a kind of a combat medical course. And we currently do it for higher education, law enforcement quite a bit through Tennessee Higher Education. So Sean's agency was the hosting agency in Chattanooga that had us down about a month ago now to conduct that course. And through a series of short conversations, we realized that we had some friends in common and also that you were involved in that event. And obviously, you know, most of what my company does is eat, sleep, and breathe active shooter events and how to mitigate those and how to get better at them and all that kind of stuff. So I thought, from talking to Tom, I thought you'd be an awesome guest to have on just because of your involvement in that event. But also what I saw when I was down in Chattanooga, just from our brief conversation too, about how quickly you're a forward thinker, which I love. A lot of leadership in law enforcement, I think you would agree, are not. They are in the wrong direction. They're not forward thinking enough about the boots on the ground. They're more forward thinking about the latest trend, blah, blah. And I get why their brain goes there sometimes, but I think a lot of leadership forgets about the boots on the ground and what do they need to do their job most effectively and to support that. And I saw very quickly that you had implemented some changes for your teams, which we won't get into. It doesn't matter, but it was obvious to me, and I have an appreciation for that. Just I've been boots on the ground, and I've been an agency head, and so I am wired a lot like you. Give the men and women the equipment and training they need, and get out of their way. If you have good people, just get out of their way. And it looks like you've done that, and the feedback from your people, by the way, was just that. So I don't know if you hear that or not personally, but just know that was the feedback we got as well.
Well, and on the flip side, I've heard nothing but good things from our folks about the training that you provided. So that's huge. And I think it's important for folks in our business to understand, and maybe having experienced it firsthand, if you don't give your officers the right equipment, the right training, and the right mindset, right, it's going to take a bad day and make it a whole lot worse. And so ultimately that's the oath I've taken, right, is to make sure our agency is ready for that bad day. We hope it never comes. But I'm not going to be standing in front of a national audience telling them, oh, we weren't prepared.
All right. So, yeah, no, that's great. And just full disclosure, not the class that I didn't teach any of it, Tom. I have awesome. That's not true. I did the intro. I do about a 25-minute intro for that course, and then I get out of my team's way because I got great people that teach that, and they've taught it over 100 times now, probably. So I know I've always been able to spot talent, and I have a very talented team, and we love putting the course on. It's an awesome course. I went through it years ago after I left the department. I guess full disclosure now that the statute of limitations is passed. They snuck me into a class. Not that anybody would have cared anyway, but they snuck me into one after I was gone, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. And it is next level as far as your medical ability goes. And that was hard for me to wrap my head around. I was a door kicker, you know, so trying to focus on medical when all this stimulus is going on was very difficult for me. And I was not a very good student at all. The first time I went through it, I was terrible. I would not have won a single award for anything except probably worst student who didn't focus on medical. It was really hard for me. But anyway, I want to get it just a little bit into your background, Sean, and kind of where you grew up, how you got into law enforcement and all that, and then we'll jump off into July of 2015. So where did you grow up?
So grew up in northern New Jersey, just about 20 miles outside New York City. Normal childhood. Had a couple of cousins and an uncle that were in law enforcement, NYPD. When I go to college, I kind of thought I wanted to be a cop, and then I volunteered as a EMT in a small city in Pennsylvania where I went to school, and would talk with the cops, when we weren't on a call, and that was the hook. And so when I told my father, as I was wrapping up my college career, like, hey, I want to be a cop, he was not happy. But I got on with the New Jersey State Police in 1994.
Okay.
And served 7 years with them, rural policing, city policing, special operations, Marine Bureau. During that time, I had my first OIS.
That's officer involved shooting for people that don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Acronyms are a thing.
Yeah. And so that was 1996. And the way we support our officers today versus back then, stark difference. So you were on your own to figure it out. And it was tough. But you went there. Let's get into that real quick, if you don't mind.
Because that's going to lead into a lot more stuff we're going to talk about later. So what was the shooting you were involved in?
So it was a traffic stop on Interstate 95, just outside of Trenton. 6:00 on a Tuesday evening, rush hour traffic. Winds up being two Jamaican nationals that were traveling from New York down to Philly. And ultimately, I knew something was up, and we had certain procedures, so I had to go get, consent to search for him. And in that process, the driver decided he was going to jump back in the car and take off. And in my brilliance, the only way I could get up to them was up on the passenger side, and I leaned across the passenger into the vehicle to try and grab the driver. And they started dragging me down the road, and the one guy grabbed my pistol as I had it out. And so fired my rounds, was able to back out, and they came to a stop. And subsequently, they got taken to the hospital, and they found 50 pounds of weed and 2 loaded handguns concealed in the dashboard of the car.
Wow.
And when they told me that, so that was like 6:00 that night. I didn't know this until 6:00 in the morning after they interviewed me, that there was 2 weapons in the dashboard concealed. And in that moment, I realized I was that close to being dead.
Oh, yeah.
So, yet relatively, new in my marriage, being able to try and convey that to my wife, she didn't know how to take it.
Just another normal day at the office.
Right. Yeah. And so, there was no support network. They brought in a mental health guy that talked about pulling a red wagon behind you with all your stuff, but it just didn't resonate,
Sure.
And so really it was talking with other troopers that had been in life and death scenarios helped me to kind of process it, but it took a long time. And I remember for the first 6 months after that, my heart would be in my throat when I made a traffic stop.
Sure.
So,
well, most people don't understand what that does to the brain chemistry. If you've never been put in that situation where your life is literally on the line, it changes your brain chemistry. Like it's a fact, and then it just is what it is. Not everybody experiences PTSD. It's 35 to 40% experience true PTSD from an event like that. But your brain chemistry is altered, and how long it's altered and how bad it's altered depends on a lot of factors that they didn't wrap their head around back then.
Right.
Obviously. So,
yeah. But I left law enforcement. I know this now. I didn't know it then, right? Like the number of law enforcement that leave the job after being in a critical incident, there's a lot of research on it, whatever. But I had an opportunity to come work for my dad. He had a sock company here in Tennessee, and I ran toward that, right? And my brothers were already down here working for him.
You said a sock company?
Yeah, hosiery.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Make sure that wasn't another acronym.
No.
I know. I thought when he first said it, I was like,
I know where your brain went.
Security Operations
I know exactly where your brain went.
We were one of the largest suppliers to Nike.
Oh,
their
right.
athletic socks,
Okay.
Smart Wool, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, but by 2005, the textile industry here in the United States had gone south, and literally, and so we had to sell the company. My wife and I loved living in Chattanooga, and I missed law enforcement. It was the thing that, people would ask me, do you miss it? Do you miss it? And I'd be like, no, I don't miss it. I missed the hell out of it.
Yeah.
You know? And so I got on with Chattanooga in 2007 and restarted my career from there.
So patrol, obviously, to start with, that's what most agencies do. And then where'd you go from there?
So I had to do a little detour. I really wanted to do something in a specialized unit, one of which would have potentially been K-9, but I had to go do accreditation for a year.
Oh, God, I'm
which
sorry.
is mind-numbing.
Yes.
But it then opened the door. I was able to go over as a K-9 handler with our highway interdiction unit. And then this guy that's the other side of the room, he was already in the K-9 unit, and that's where I wanted to go, the full K-9 unit. And so I was able to switch over to that. That is my passion. I think the best job in police work is working a dog. And you're in the middle of everything. And it's not, like if you're on SWAT, you're in the middle of everything, but there's a team, you got a lot of gear, you got all this stuff. When you're a K-9 handler, there were so many times when I started with a few officers with me, but by the time we were getting to where it was going to be the suspect, there was nobody around you except you and your K-9 partner.
Yeah.
And so that bond is just tremendous. And so that's where I spent a big chunk of my career, and then got promoted to sergeant, became Homeland Security Coordinator, post the incident we'll talk about in a minute. And so I was going out teaching churches and businesses about active shooter response and those type of things, and really trying to push it out to the public that, we've got to be prepared. And then got promoted to lieutenant. So I was a commander of our downtown area for Chattanooga. And then this opportunity to stay in Chattanooga but be serving at an executive level came up a little over a year ago, and they selected me for that, and so I've been at UTC for the last about 14 months.
All right, that was a really 30,000-foot view, so I'm going to back up. A couple of things for the audience. Your best friend happens to be sitting in the room. That also happens to be a recent addition friend of mine, but is friends with some of my personnel and all that kind of stuff. So the other guy in the room that nobody can see or has any idea what he's talking about, it's not his imaginary friend. There is an actual human being in here.
It's not the little red wagon.
That's true. Not that either. So I was officially considered a K-9 groupie, right? So I was a narcotics guy. I love narcotics work. That's where I wanted to be. But if that ever got where there was no opportunity there, K-9 is where I wanted to be. And I would hang out. Our K-9 and aviation are at the same building on the academy grounds, and I hung out there all the time. I did an internship the summer before I went to the academy, and I spent every Monday night with K-9. It was their training night, and I just fell in love with that world and that environment. I never worked a dog, but I was definitely considered a K-9 and technically an aviation groupie, both. Aviation got me my own aviation hat because I was out there so much. Working dogs and helicopters. What's not cool about that? I'm sorry. It is. But you were on interdiction, and for people that this audience is not primarily law enforcement. So explain what interdiction is and what they do. I mean, obviously I know, but just explain to the audience a little bit.
Yeah. So our focus was on initiating contacts on the interstate relative to traffic violators who were potentially, committing crimes. Typically, it was narcotics transportation, but it could also be human trafficking, which we didn't call it that at that time. But, it could be, terrorism related that's rolling through, anything that was out of the norm. And so we dealt a lot with traffic coming out of Metro Atlanta, which was a hub for the drug trade. And so they weren't necessarily destined for Chattanooga. They may have been, but a lot of times they were coming up this way, or they were going up 75 toward Ohio, that type of stuff. So,
and working a dog on a traffic stop on the interstate is a whole different animal.
Yes.
If people don't understand dogs and how their noses. I mean, just all the stuff and all the additional danger. Like I hated doing traffic stops on the interstate just because it's so much more dangerous just because of traffic and speed and just all the things. I hated them. I didn't do many for that reason. So I have a huge appreciation for interdiction guys. First of all, you got to be a really keen and you're not going to have some idiot just like go over to interdiction. Like you're going to be probably hand selected. If I had to guess, like most agencies, you're going to be a good investigator. You're going to be good with people. You're going to have good rapport. You're going to be tactically sound, like all those things. So, like, obviously, you're not going to brag on yourself sitting here, but just understand for our audience that doesn't understand that, like, if you go to an interdiction unit, it's because some people think very highly of you and your skill set, and that's a whole different animal. Actually, out there on the road executing it as well. But interdiction is a thing, and I mean, obviously, over time, criminals have gotten a lot more sophisticated in how they combat interdiction, which I'm not going to get into because we don't want to give anybody any ideas. But so that's an interesting role to be in. We worked with our interdiction quite a bit. I was on the investigative side, but we use them a lot to mainly shield wires and things like that. Which again, the audience won't understand that, but I'm not going down that road in the interest of time. So, how long were you on interdiction before you? Guys, did you promote to sergeant from interdiction? So
I was a year on interdiction when I really wanted to go full-time K9.
Okay.
With the patrol dog.
Yeah.
And so I put in and got moved over to our full K9 unit.
Yeah, where you could not just search for narcotics. You could use your dog for bite work too, right?
Yep.
To apprehend bad guys. Apprehension work, they call it. It's a fancy way of saying the dog bites people and holds them.
So what you're saying, Brink, with interdiction, when you're getting pulled over on the interstate and it involves that, it's not a rookie that's coming up to you that everybody wants to talk their way out of. You're dealing with a little bit more.
Yep.
They're looking at a whole lot more than just what you did then.
Yes, and I mean, now some interdiction units are in marked cars, and you wouldn't be able to tell they're interdiction versus not. But most agencies, they're unmarked cars. They're sitting on the interstate. Like, I used to mess with our guys all the time. I'd blow by them doing 95 miles an hour because I know they're not coming after me.
Yeah.
Because I'm not what they're looking for, Now, I knew them, and they got to know my vehicle too. But, I would mess with them a little bit. But they're usually in unmarked units. They usually run in packs. There's usually at least one dog there. They're going to ask you a lot of questions, or, they're just going to do that. It's versus like your standard Tennessee Highway Patrol guy that pulls you over for doing 90 in a 55. He's probably going to ask a lot of the same questions, but, there's traffic enforcement guys and then there's interdiction guys. Interdiction uses traffic violations to conduct investigations and make the stop. The traffic guys are just out there to enforce traffic laws and may or may not take it much further than that. It depends on the officer, I guess. But no, I'd venture to say every interdiction guy I ever dealt with anywhere in the country was from either squared away to very squared away, just because of what they did and how they had to do it, because you had to wear a lot of hats. So, all right, so you transferred to full-time K9. How long were you there?
I think I wound up spending 4 years.
Before you decided to promote?
Yeah. So, up to that point, when I went over to K9, the unit had not had a physical apprehension in years. And so my imaginary friend was already over there, was about 6 months into it. So I had to wind up training a whole new dog from scratch with our trainers. And my second day out on the street, got a physical apprehension, and he was the first guy I called.
Oh, yeah.
And he didn't believe me.
I wouldn't either. That's unheard of, right? Like, there's no way.
Yeah.
That's every handler's, like, it's bad. I mean, it may sound bad, but, like, it's not. You worked your tail off to get this, not only the rapport with the dog, but get the dog to do everything you want it to do. And it's grueling on the body, too. Like, the amount of, I don't think the general public understands that either, what canine officers go through. It is grueling on your body. So to get through all that, the ultimate goal for a canine guy, of course, is apprehend a bad guy with your dog. That's what it's all about. I mean, you don't have to love that, but that is it. So your day 2, after you certify this dog, you get a apprehension. What was the call, or like was it? So
the two guys were in what was believed to be a stolen car, and they had crashed out on an elevated highway
in a pursuit, I guess.
I don't know if they were being chased at the time. It's been so long, I can't remember. But they ran off into the woods, and so we got called out there and started searching for them. And the first guy gave up right away. He didn't want any part of the dog. But the second guy wasn't interested, and so the dog tracked for really only about 5 minutes, and was right on it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Where did he hit him?
In the leg.
Yeah.
Yep.
So was he laying down?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Obviously, I'm not going to get into the training behind dogs and where they bite because I don't want the general public to know. But I can tell just okay. Yeah, but you were calling to brag, but also a little bit rub it in, right? Maybe.
I would never do that.
Yeah, I don't.
Hey, you take the wins when you can get them.
Yeah, I know cops, dude. Yeah, I know exactly what was going on. So that's awesome. And then you promoted what year to sergeant?
It was 2016. I promoted to sergeant.
Okay,
and then I had to go back to patrol.
Yeah,
and then probably within a year, I was doing the Homeland Security piece.
Yeah, and that's when you got into doing the active shooter stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
yeah,
which obviously it's my life. I mean, it's where I eat, sleep, and breathe. While I started this company. And then how long were you doing that before you decided to promote for lieutenant? Could have been long.
No. Well, so I did that for 4.5, 5 years.
Okay.
And then promoted to lieutenant.
What year did you promote to lieutenant then?
I guess it was November of 23. Or
Okay.
no, yeah, it was November of 23 is when I actually promoted because then I left the city in May or the end of April of 24.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I just saw today, I was doing some research that I guess when you go into the higher education world, you don't just become a chief of police. You're like a vice chancellor or something. I don't even know what that means.
Associate vice chancellor.
I know that means
public
something.
Safety. Yeah.
I know that means something in higher ed. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah. The neat thing is so we have responsibility for emergency management, all the health and safety. So life safety systems, sprinkler systems, fire alarm, fire extinguishers, AEDs.
Okay.
All, OSHA compliance, all this stuff.
So it's a combined department with UTC?
Yeah. So I got roughly about 40, 45 or 50 employees. 24 of us are sworn law enforcement. The rest are in other roles supporting the overall functions.
And I'm so terrible with names. So remind me the guy's name that was our coordinator for that role played for us. It's your emergency management guy.
We had Brett Fuchs and then
That's
Jason
him.
Patty.
Brett was phenomenal, by the way. That dude, I mean, if something needed done, it was done before we finished the sentence. Like, I mean, obviously you can spot talent, but he was fantastic to work with and made our job really, really easy. So I just wanted to say that, especially in case he's listening. But sorry, Brett, I forgot your name. I'm terrible with names. I can see your face 3 years from now. I know exactly where I know you're from, but I'm terrible with names. So.
And I stole him from the Dean of Students office to bring him over to public safety. So
you can spot talent. I mean, good leaders spot talent and stay out of their way. I mean, that's good. So until you've been there now, what, almost a year, I guess?
Yeah, a little over a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you made a lot of moves fast then on what you did for the guys as far as equipment and training and stuff like that. But I'm sure it was very welcome from a boots on the ground standpoint. And the thing I like about you is you lead from the front. Like you were there. You weren't just, making an appearance. You were there for the training. You were there for the scenarios. You guys helped coordinate, get the EMS resources that make that class as real as we can make it.
Yeah.
And most agencies and most cities we go to, it's never an issue, but it's really never an issue if it's you guys reaching out, versus us. So that was really, really great. And I think it makes the training, well, we both know it does. It makes the training experience for the guys as real as we can make it.
Yeah.
So that if they do have to face their worst day, they've at least been there before. We advertise on the radio here in Nashville, and the host that does our spots is a guy named Matt Murphy. And Matt came through TECC a few years ago. It's been more than 2 years ago now. I know it was pre-Covenant, and he and I were talking after Covenant happened, and he said, if I'm being totally honest with you, he said, when I went through your course, he said, I thought the fog machines and the blinking lights and the screaming and the fake blood and the sirens, I thought that was a little much. And he said, and then I saw the body cam footage from Covenant, and he said, and I saw smoke and blinking lights and sirens, and I'm like, I mean, it's easier to perform in that environment if you've been in that environment before versus never. Not that it's ever easy. I'm not saying that, but so doing things like with your EMS people and all that, make it as real as we can make it, so that, to your point, hopefully we never need any of this stuff. But if we do, then they've at least got the ability to do that. And the guys are probably more than likely going to end up using it like a bad car crash or something like that.
Yep.
Anyway, it's,
Yep.
bleeding control is a life skill, but, and I always also say all bleeding stops eventually. We'd like to be the one stopping it though, not just letting nature take its course. But it is a fun course to do and go through. So, it was awesome. Hopefully we'll get back down there. Do you have anything on his background before we get into the event I want to hit on?
I think he's covered it.
Okay.
It shows the experience jumps.
Yeah.
You learn something at each one that puts it all together, which we love working with because that there's a full understanding that a lot of our civilian public does not understand.
Yep.
That's not out there for them. They do not. They all have an opinion of what they would do, but yet they've never seen the situation. So your background's extensive and where you are now, and appreciate it.
No, and we're the sum of all our not just professional experience, but our life experiences. This is something I've shared with people before, and so I got 25 plus years now in law enforcement, but it's not just that experience. I mean, even when I was in the private sector, that experience all makes you who you are, the good, bad, and everything in the middle. So I've been blessed to have the opportunity to serve now 3 law enforcement agencies, and I've met tremendous people throughout my career that I've learned. Some of the first people I learned from as a trooper, my sergeants and stuff were Vietnam vets.
That's cool.
Right? Like, so they were at the end of their career, and I remember them telling me in 94 or 95, like, oh, I wouldn't want to be a cop today. And what do we tell our folks that, nowadays is like, oh man, I wouldn't want to start a cop career now, but it's just amazing. And I feel like we have a ethical and a moral obligation to take what we learn and share it to the next generation. And that's how I operate. I'm trying to cultivate our folks so that they can step up and take the next leadership role. Because I won't be there forever,
Right.
So.
Well, I'm fortunate. I have 2 kids that are both tracking for that law enforcement career. So that's so if anybody has any openings,
Shameless plug.
Yeah, exactly.
No, and his kids are. Yeah, your kids are. I can't imagine why they're wired for law enforcement.
They
It's
lost
weird.
their minds.
Yeah, something about being around their dad and what he does. But all right, well, let's get into. I want to kind of set the stage, and I'm gonna let you just take it because I don't know. I know about the event, but I don't know what you know about the event. So I just want you to take like the morning of July 16th, 2015. Talk about where you were working and just take it. Tell us all about it.
So I always like to back up to the Sunday before that date. So being in the K-9 unit, it was about 2 months, I guess, on the road with the new dog, and I was doing split shifts. So I would work 1 week, I'd work day shift, and then the next week I'd work like 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. So that Sunday night, I had made a traffic stop on the interstate and nearly killed my dog. Because I let him out on the driver's side along the side of the interstate, but had not grabbed onto his collar and clipped him in. And so, thank goodness it was late at night, or else the dog would have been run over. And anyway, subsequently, wind up getting 5 firearms and a bunch of meth and stuff out of the car, arrest somebody. And so, the day of July 16th, that morning, how
many days later was this?
So it was like. That was a Sunday night, and this was Thursday. Was when the attack happened. So I'm sitting in the back lot of the police station on day shift hours. So at a K-9 unit, we had 3 city dispatch channels. So I'd be able to monitor one on the in-car radio and then one on the portable. So I could hear 2 of the 3 dispatch channels. And I'm working on the report from Sunday night. Got it. And it's just going to be right. It's just going to be an easy day. I got to get this report done because it's a big case and all that. And then I hear the call come out over on the east side of the city for shots fired at a strip mall, which happens to have military recruiting offices. And no big deal. We get shots fired all the time. And The sergeant shows up. He's the first one on scene within about a minute and a half or so, and didn't know him really well, but he was former SWAT operator, undercover. He'd been through all sorts of stuff, and so he was somebody like he didn't get excited about anything. And he gets on the radio, and just the way he said it, he says, "I got multiple shell casings, large caliber weapon," and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Because I'm like, this is real.
Yeah.
And so the last, they gave a description of the vehicle. Depending on which audio you listen to, they gave it out as either a silver convertible Ford Mustang or a white, and a Middle Eastern male, of which none of that registered. But it was headed from that location. It was headed at 153 northbound, so kind of going north and west from the original location. But hindsight, what he had done was he had opened fire on multiple recruiting offices right there. So like everybody was there, the Army, Navy, Air Force, National Guard.
Had he done this from the outside or did he go inside?
No, outside. So he rolls up in the convertible, tops down. What we understand is he uses a Sega 12-gauge shotgun, fires at least one round into the glass of the Marine Corps. And because of the graphics on the glass, whatever, it does not shatter the glass. And then he transitions to a AK-74 and probably dumps at least a mag into the storefront, and then drops back down in the seat and whips out of the parking lot. And then they give us the description headed northbound on 153. So where I am at the police station, I ultimately am like less than a mile from where the next location is going to be. So I turn out of the parking lot and I'm headed east, headed toward 153, thinking we're going to have a car chase going over into the north side of the city or whatever. When on my left, as I'm approaching what is the Naval Operational Support Center, which sits within the Tennessee River Park, I see some dust and stuff way off in the distance on the roadway. And it's the suspect that's in the suicide lane, which is typically known as the churn lane, right? And, and he's flying. And immediately I know who it is. And so I throw my lights on and I start to make a U-turn. And just as I'm making my U-turn, he's passing me. He's going toward the downtown area. Didn't realize it at the moment, but he passed up his entrance into the river park because I don't think he anticipated seeing me. So he does a 180 in the middle of the road, and now we're almost nose to nose. And I thought for just like a millisecond, I'm going to ram him. And this is the thing I always try and teach executives in law enforcement, is our policy at the time did not allow us to ram anybody. We didn't do pits. We still don't in the city police. And so I'm like, I can't do that. I'll get in trouble. Now, in hindsight, the reality is if I pitted him or hit him up there, I wouldn't be here sitting talking to you because he would have just lit me up and that would have been it. But we're navigating. This is almost just before 11 a.m., so it's heavy traffic. So we're trying to weave through traffic. And he gets into the river park, which is kind of like a long driveway, and rolls toward the NOS.
And the naval place you're talking about?
Yeah, the Naval Operational Support Center, which houses a detachment for the Navy and also for the Marine Corps. Primarily for reservists but there is an active duty staff that works there. And I can see him crash the gate. Now, just before he turns in, I'm looking out my side window, and we're making eye contact, and I could see the beard and the bugged out white eyes. And I knew in that moment, because I knew what was right behind me, I'm like, this is a terrorist attack. This is for real. And I always talk about when I'm talking with law enforcement about this day, just my life in 1983, God rest his soul, my uncle, who was a light colonel in the Marine Corps when he retired, was a rear seater in the F-4 in Vietnam. He was stationed over in Italy in 1983. And most people don't really remember what happened in 1983 in the Middle East, but it was Beirut. And at that age, I'm like, I can't put, geographically where Italy is versus the Middle East. So immediately when that happened, I was worried about my uncle. But of course, he wasn't anywhere near it. But it was significant for me in my life. And then I'm less than a year on in 1990, or a little more than a year on in New Jersey State Police in 1995 in April, Oklahoma City. Mm-hmm. So profound, impact on me. And so I'm convinced that this is going to be a car bomb. No questions. So I see him blow through the gate, and it's just a standard rolling chain link fence gate. It's not heavy duty or anything. He blows through it. And the other thing I learned from my previous traffic stop on Sunday night was my rifle mount had malfunctioned. So God bless the guys in the garage. When they're wiring it from the trunk, they have to navigate the wires over an aluminum kennel in the back, and they don't put enough conduit on it. And so the wires had rubbed on the corner of the kennel and shorted it out. So my rifle is in the trunk of my car. And so I knew immediately, either I had to have cover or distance in order to safely retrieve my rifle. So I stop about 75 yards short. I can see the car. It's now stopped in the parking lot. He had immediately bailed out and disappears out of my view behind trees. What he's doing is he's running toward the front door of the NOS. And as I get out of the car, I can hear the gunfire. He's firing into the quarterdeck or the lobby to try and gain entry into the building. And I get to the trunk, and we had this policy: you would store your rifle when you're off duty in the car, in the trunk. So you had to disengage the electronic locking mechanism. And so when I get out, I got to grab my key to actually unlock the trunk. Only the first thing that goes under high stress is your fine motor skills.
Yep.
And so I only learned most of this post this date. But for as long as I was a cop, I should have known that this was going to happen, right? But so my brain has to tell my right hand, hey, grab that black Ford key in between your index and your thumb, stick it into the locking mechanism, turn it to the right, and then lift the trunk lid. So, I mean, literally, my brain is talking to me. It's like telling me to do this. So I lift up my rifle. It's double stack, 60 rounds, and throw the sling over my shoulder, slip the selector switch on, or I charge around, slip the selector switch on fire, and then leave my bandolier with 6 more mags sitting in the trunk, right? These are lessons learned, right? Like, if you got equipment, don't leave it behind.
Sure.
And so I come out from behind the car. I can't see him, but I can hear some muffled gunfire, which means he's inside. And there is an older gentleman that has come up along the sidewalk along this roadway, just a jogger or whatever. It's a nice hot summer day, and he lays down next to the railing for the fence there, and I look over at him, and you probably have the ability to bleep stuff out.
Sure.
Okay. Because I look at him and I go, you better fucking run.
Yeah.
And I have no idea who he was, but he got up and he ran.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the stuff? He just laid down.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I start moving forward, and this is the other thing that's significant. So 1999 Columbine. As a state trooper in New Jersey, by the time I left in 2001, we did not do active shooter training. We didn't do anything related to, hey, if this happens, what are you going to do? And so I come to Chattanooga in 2007. They have a patrol rifle program. They do active shooter training. And the scenario always starts at the front door, right, of the building. Mm-hmm. And then the instructor says, all right, start. And you're doing it in 2015, you're doing it with a team of 4. So the reason why I point that out is because you literally, under high stress, you will revert to your training. And so if our training is not at the forefront of where it needs to be, to be effective, we're letting our folks down. So, so as I'm moving forward, what winds up being the lieutenant commander, the CO, the Navy CO of the NOS, I kicked out his window. He ran out to where I was at. What happened was he sees the car crash, or he hears it. A couple of his people come to his door, say, "Hey, car's crashed through the gate." He tells them to go, let everybody else know in the building. He retrieves a personally owned firearm, which was a big no-no. As he comes up with the firearm, I think it was a 9mm, he sees the suspect walking across his front window toward the front door, and sees him with a rifle. And so he tries to engage him through the glass. It's double pane glass. None of his rounds ever reach him. And the suspect doesn't hear it because ultimately we find out he's wearing earplugs. So at that point, he believes that his folks have either concealed themselves in the building or have gotten out. And so he's like, "Hey, I got to get out, because either I'm going to face this guy head on in the main space in the building with a 9mm versus a rifle, or I'm done." And so, and he's a helicopter pilot by trade. So he's not a combat veteran. And so he kicks out the window and he runs out to where I'm at. And the other thing they don't tell you under high stress is you get tunnel vision, right? So you don't see things. So he comes up to me. He tells me hey, it's an active shooter. There's guys in the building. And then like 5 weeks later, he comes to the police service center to introduce himself to everybody. Comes over to me. He's like, "Hey, I'm Tim White. I'm the commander from the NOS. I met you that day on the Riverwalk." And I'm like, "Sir, it's nice to meet you for the first time." And literally to this day, I have no memory of ever meeting him. My only point of reference is I could watch my in-car video, and sure enough, he came up to me. The other challenge was, initially on the one in-car radio, I notified dispatch that, I'm like, we would call out on the radio, "Break, break, break." Means we have an emergency communication. And I tell him exactly where I'm at. And I'm telling him exactly where he's going. He's going in the River Park to the Marine Corps building. I'm like, everybody in the police department knew where that was, I thought. And so when I get out of the car, I'm on a different channel over on my portable. And I was able to call active shooter, and could never get on the radio again, because there were cops who were not on scene, who had diarrhea of the mouth. It's one of my pet peeves. It's like, if you're
same,
if you're not there on scene,
shut up.
Yes,
just come,
just show up. And so, so I knew at least audibly, I knew where he was. I had a good idea, and so he's inside. What we know in the after action report is he goes to the right, which is the Navy side. He is shooting through the walls. He's cutting walls. So a training technique that is taught overseas by militant groups and stuff that our combat veterans have seen in Iraq and stuff. That's how he would clear a room. And that's where he strikes Petty Officer Smith, is the first one to be injured on site. He's trying to close a door when he's hit through the wall by at least one round. And then the suspect walks up on him and shoots him several more times. The last round he was trying to do was shoot him in the head, and Randall Smith churns his head at the last second because it winds up being a graze wound right here. Randall would ultimately pass away a day and a half later. Ultimately, officers were able to get him out and to an ambulance and get him to the hospital, which I'll tell you that story in a minute. But he then comes back. The suspect then comes back out the front door because he's looking for us, and I'm still about 50 yards away, and I'm trying to conceal myself behind like a little tree because I'm waiting for someone else. And I look back and I see a detective pull up that I know, and I'm like, cool, all right, somebody's here. And then I'm still waiting. I'm waiting because I'm focused downrange, waiting for him to pop out, and nobody ever shows up. And I'm still waiting because I know in my mind, I'm like, I need someone else with me. And I know there is one other officer in my line of sight. And this is the thing that I tell people I'm very honest about it. I'll never say to anybody who it was, but I'm like, I know I'm about to go die, and that is not the guy I'm going to die with.
Yeah.
He's not the guy. So I'm waiting for someone. Little did I know that there were cops piling up behind me, showing up.
Like how far?
Probably within 30 to 40 yards.
Okay.
So, but they're behind me, you know, and because I could never get back on the radio, I can't give them any information as to, you know, where he's at, you know, kind of what's going on. So they're rolling up and they're like, oh, like what's going on? But they can't ask me because I'm up ahead of them. And so one of our unmarked cars had come in from the other part of the river park and drove in front of the NOS. So the suspect's out front. He starts tracking him and he's firing at him, and he hits the vehicle 3 times. The last round goes through the car door and underneath the officer's left rear end, you know, into the seat. He's not hit, but and so he whips right past me as he's trying to get away. Suspect goes back in.
Same building?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Goes back in the building. What he does is he now goes to the left. He goes to the Marine Corps side of the building. And I'm still waiting. And I'm telling myself, this is taking way too long. Way too long.
What's the actual time you think that is?
So it was probably, I think it was roughly about 10:58 in the morning when he arrives, crashes the gate at the NOS. This is at about 11:06, and I'm like, this is taking too long.
So 8 minutes at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is an eternity when you're in the middle of fire.
Yes, yeah.
Feels like 80 minutes, I bet.
Yes.
The other thing that we did not train, and I'm not former military, I was not a tactical operator, you know, like SWAT or anything like that, but a basic concept was covering over open ground under fire. You know, now
Bound and Overwatch.
Yep,
Yeah.
now we do bounding Overwatch. And I'm like, I knew I had to get from point A to point B, but there was no cover. The closest thing I could get to probably would have been his car to provide
The
some
suspect?
Yeah, would have been the first point of some level of cover. There was, I didn't know this at the time because I couldn't see with my eyes. There was a little bit of a defilade kind of near the gate entrance. It was a drainage ditch that could have provided some protection. But at the time, from where I was, I couldn't see it. And so I'm like, I know I need someone so that we can kind of cover each other as we're going down range. So, so Grover Wilson, who's God love him, he's my hero. He's a SWAT operator, but working patrol. He's over on the east side of the city. That sergeant I referenced in the beginning had told him, go find that, you know, SOB. And so he's racing toward the scene, and he rolls up. And he's asking officers, what's going on? What's going on? And they're like, you know, like active shooter? I don't know. And so he gets down to where I'm at, and he's Tennessee National Guard,
Okay.
done a couple deployments overseas. And he's just moving forward, and he goes, hey, we got to go. Just like that. Just, hey, we got to go. And it was like, here we go. And so it winds up, there's probably about 15 of us that move through the gate, just kind of a gaggle. It was not, you know, formation or anything. And by this point, he has popped out the back of the building and has gone into the motor pool area, which is fenced in. And you can tell the difference between gunfire inside a building versus outside. And so I'm thinking the quickest way to get to him is to go down the right side of the building and then make a left, and then we can get toward the entrance to the motor pool.
So you could hear, like, you had stimulus, what you were pushing towards. Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
And what's amazing is, so by the time we get to the back of the building, what was 15 or 16 of us is 5. And it's like, you know, in hindsight, you're like, where the hell did everybody go?
Yeah.
You know? The other thing I didn't think about, but everybody else acknowledged this, you know, as we're passing the car, everybody's suspecting, hey, this is going to be a V-bed. It's going to go off, you know.
That's a vehicle-borne IED explosive for people who know what a V-bed is.
So we get to the back of the building, and Grover and my other buddy Cornbread, they button hook around the corner of the building. They move toward a big air conditioning unit for cover. Luke Timmons is standing right at the corner of the building. Me and Dennis Pedigo are standing at the high point on the property, which is slightly higher than the fence line, looking into the motor pool. So we can see into the motor pool in the wide open. And then Kevin Flanagan is next to the A post on a car that's parked on the side lot. And the next thing I see is a gentleman, medium complexion, skin, beard, dark hair, gray T-shirt, black shorts, is running off the back right corner, like the 2-3 corner of the property, trying to climb the fence. At the time, I thought, I'm looking through my iron sights of my rifle. I'm like, going, is that him? No, that's not him. And I come back to center in the middle of the motor pool. Winds up, that is a corpsman who was working out when this all popped off, and suspect's shooting at him, and he's trying to get away. He couldn't get over the fence. He winds up just laying down on the berm there. But so as I come back to center, I see the suspect. I didn't realize at the time I'm the only one that had seen him. I already knew what he looked like. And so with iron sights, I start firing rounds at him. But there is a privacy fence that that's wrapped around the whole motor pool. And there's a bunch of heavy duty trucks and armored up Humvees in the space and whatever. And so, another one of the things, I am not a heavy duty marksman or anything like that, but I'm sure ultimately I'm compensating for this privacy fence that I'm shooting over. And best I can guess, my rounds are going high because they're not hitting him as he's running towards us, and he's bringing the rifle up from the hip. He's just holding at the hip, and he starts firing rounds. And if you have ever heard an AK-74 fired at you, it is like a cannon. And I look at Pedigo. Pedigo's a motor officer who was on a funeral escort when he showed up. He's the only guy there from law enforcement with a pistol. But that's the type of guy.
Pistol in a rifle fight.
Yeah. But that's the type of guy he is. So we're standing next to each other, and I'm like looking at him, and I say in my head, you say the weirdest things when this is going on, but I'm like, that's pretty dumb. Then, so, and then I realize, why isn't anybody else shooting? Because I can see him, and then all of a sudden I hear gunfire from my right, which winds up being Flanagan because now he can see him, and so now he's starting to send rounds down range, and then I'm like, oh crap, we need cover. So me and Pedigo turn around to retreat behind an alcove that's just a little bit back on the right side of the building. 2 rounds zip past my ear in the hot summer air, just that distinct crack. And in that moment is when I accepted I was not going home. Sorry. I shouldn't say I'm sorry.
No,
it's just real.
That's real. Yeah.
Because for me, it was realizing in that moment I was going to see my twin brother again.
Yeah.
Right. And there was no better place to go down but with my brothers and sisters. So, and it's wild because in that moment you let go. You're not trying to hold on to life at that moment. And I never understood it until afterwards. But at that point, I was playing with house money, because I'm already dead. Yep. And so I look back and I see that Dennis is down. And he tries to get up on all fours. And he's got a motor helmet on and he rips it off. And I yelled at him. I'm like, you're going to have to beep this out. But get the fuck up. He had been hit in the leg. I didn't know it in the moment. But I realized, okay, he's been hit. And I got to get him. And so at that point, I have auditory exclusion. At that moment is when it kicks in. I don't hear anything. And so I move toward him, and, in proximity, I'm also moving toward the suspect, but we can't see him because now he's come up close enough to the fence that he's blocked by the privacy fence, but you can hear him firing, they tell me. And so I scoop Dennis up underneath his arm, and Dennis he's bigger than I am. And keeping my rifle downrange, but I can't see the suspect, and just start dragging him. And it's amazing, right? Like you talk about the adrenaline dump and stuff. I should not have been able to drag Dennis, but I did. And we got back behind this alcove, and there was like 15 cops there, and I was so pissed because I'm like, we're in a firefight and you all are back behind this alcove, which is where I was getting to. We were trying to get to anyway. I mean, it makes sense, right? Like you don't want to be standing in the open in a firefight. But I asked Dennis, where are you hit? He points to his left leg. And so I run my hand underneath his motor boot and I don't see any blood. And I hear a sergeant behind me calling on the radio, hey, we need an ambulance. And I'm like, Dennis is going to live. I want to go kill this son of a bitch.
Yeah.
And so I come back out from the alcove and start running back toward the fence line. At that juncture, what we figured out was Flanagan had been firing from the right, and then Timmons, who was at the corner of the building, is also starting to fire. It pushes the suspect from our position from right to left, and he's trying to conceal himself behind some heavy-duty trucks. When he comes into view of Cornbread and Grover Wilson, who are behind the air conditioning unit, and they start firing rounds at him through the privacy fence. What they didn't realize at the time was those guys were following policy. Their first 20 rounds were Hornady urban tap rounds. And as soon as they're hitting that stuff, the privacy slats, they're disintegrating.
Yeah, that's tactical application police rounds that fragment to help over penetration stuff in houses. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they tell great stories. Like Cornbread, when he first comes up on target, he pulls the trigger, nothing happens. He tells Grover like he's got a malfunction. What he realizes ultimately is his selector switch is still unsafe. Grover's using a short barrel SWAT weapon. It's not automatic, but he's pulling the trigger so fast the weapon can't properly cycle, and so it gets a jam. So
that's fast.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
So he rips out a mag, puts ball ammo in, he's back up on target. Suspect goes down, he's laying on his back, rifle sitting on top of him, hand shaking. From a distance, they're giving him verbal commands. He's not responding, but his hand's still moving. They give him 5 rounds. And this is as I'm running back up towards where they're at. And then they move up to him, giving him verbals again. Hand's still moving. They give him 5 more rounds. And I always say, because I've watched the not body cam, but the in-car camera, but you can hear it. It's the sweetest sound in the world. And Grover's position from his experience in the military is these threats are not over until they're over.
Amen.
Yeah. And so at that point, I knew there was only one shooter. Most other people didn't know that, but, and Grover and Cornbread are like, hey, we got to go in there. We got to search. And I'm like, yeah, but in my mind, I'm like, there was someone over here that was trying to climb the fence. Let me go find them. So I start moving that way. And I hear someone in the woods going like, I'm a Marine. It was a young Marine that had jumped the fence and had hid in the woods. And so I'm just passing them off to people behind me. I get back to where that corpsman is. He's laying on the berm. I didn't know at the time, but he was laying on a hornet's nest.
Literally. Oh, my God.
And so I'm like, hey, come to me. Come to the fence line. And he's like, well, why? I said, just show me your hands. He's like, why? I said, I don't want you getting shot. You're going to walk with me toward the front of the motor pool. I'm on the outside of the fence. He's on the inside until I can pass you off to a cop. So we do that. Then I see there's enough people in the motor pool. So I go to the building, the back door where the suspect had come out, and there's two cops in that little room. It's kind of like a utility room, and they are locked out. They don't know what to do. And I didn't realize it at the time, but they're fighting that, do we stay? Do we go?
Fight or freeze. Yeah.
And I'm already like,
let's go.
We're dead already. Yeah. Like, what's the big deal? We've done this 100 times, right? Like, let's someone hold the hallway. We'll start trying to get in the rooms. Fire alarms going off, the gunpowder, smoke and everything. So hot and so loud. But we just start clearing the back. And we did find one sailor who was locked in a room. Literally, we got him out in the hallway, and he was scared. And so I laid on top of him. I said, listen, ain't nothing happened to you. I got you. We got officers coming in the front. So there was a lot of communication verbally as, just say blue, 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 because some of these rooms were, doors to the back hallway, doors to the front hallway. As they start to clear the back motor pool, what they find is, and this is really the true story, about these soldiers and sailors. So the Marines had enough time. They started to evacuate the building. A couple concealed in the building, barricaded the door, and it worked because the suspect tried to get in, couldn't. But the rest of them had bailed out the back. And about 5 of them were behind a workout connex on the opposite side of the building that we came down outside. There's like a little workout connex. And one of the Marines had retrieved a personal weapon. And then the suspect pops out on that side of the building. They're like, should we engage him? And it looked like he was wearing body armor. It wasn't. It was just a low-bearing vest. But they're like, you got a big rifle. We got a 9mm pistol. And so the suspect goes back in the building. Well, the gunny tosses most of the Marines over the fence. And they take that personally owned weapon. And so at that point, Gunny Sullivan, Sergeant Wyatt, and Sergeant Holmquist go into the motor pool because they know they got people back there and they want to get them out.
These are all Marines you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Gunny Sullivan is trying to pull the gate into the motor pool closed when the suspect comes out the back. And
out of the back of the building.
Out of the back of the building.
Towards the motor pool. Okay.
Towards the motor pool and engages Gunny Sullivan. What they find is the weapon that the personally owned weapon that the Marines had both the DNA of Gunny Sullivan and Sergeant Wyatt on it, but it was never fired. So best guess is, Gunny probably comes up on target, but never has a chance to get a round off, and he's hit. Sergeant Wyatt moves to try and retrieve Gunny, and this is the distinct memory. The way Gunny ultimately is positioned on the pavement, and Wyatt is next to him, almost on, like a little bit above him. He was trying to pull him to cover.
Got it.
And Sergeant Holmquist had yelled as much as he could, and then he moved toward the fence on the north side of the property. He was trying to climb the fence. So the suspect enters the motor pool. After multiple rounds are dumped into Gunny and Wyatt, he moves around the building, sees Holmquist up on the fence, shoots him through his chest. He falls back on the ground. He comes up to him and puts the rifle right on his chin, kills him. Then he's moving back in the back of the property, and there's some trailers for the Humvees, and he starts checking underneath them. And he gets to the one where Skip Wells has concealed himself, young 21-year-old Marine, and at point-blank range shoots him 6 times. And then subsequently we can piece it together that's when he starts shooting at that corpsman that I see. And so we clear the building. There's guys clearing the motor pool. Then I come into the motor pool. When I see my friend, my imaginary friend, who has an incredible story to tell. And the first thing I do is I tell him, I said, give me your phone. I need to call my wife. And I just real quick called my wife. I said, hey, just so you know, something's happened, but I'm okay. And I wouldn't talk to her for several hours. So we would kind of regroup outside. They were going to do secondary searches and stuff. And I'm like, cool, I'll get my dog. Right?
Yeah.
And then I said, no, I'm done. There was 100 cops, 200 cops there at that point. I'm like, I'm done. And so at that point, we headed back to the service center, all those that were shooters, to be ultimately, get interviewed and all that kind of stuff. The profound thing was that the chief at the time was actually coming to Nashville for a meeting or something, and so he's racing back to Chattanooga. So by the time he gets there, it's like an hour and a half later, and he comes up into the conference room to check in on all the officers that were involved. I've dealt with him quite a bit. I consider him a dear friend, but he thought I was there because I'm the FOP president and rep. And
that's the Fraternal Order of Police, by the way. And
so he finally gets to me, and he's like, hey, thanks for being here for the guys. I'm like, I was involved, right? And he's like, oh, I didn't know that. I said, I was the first one on scene. He's like, well, I mean, you guys did a great job. And again, you're going to have to bleep this out too. I said, go fuck yourself. There's 4 men dead. It's not a successful day.
Yeah, sure.
And that threw him off, you know. But, you know, then subsequently, like the governor came and all these people. And this guy guarded us. He stayed outside the door. He wouldn't let anybody in. But finally, I snuck out, and I'm like, let's get the hell out of here. Because no disrespect to the governor or anybody else, but I had no interest in talking to them.
Sure.
Way more important things. At
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was the crux of the event. It winds up, the suspect was a naturalized U.S. citizen, immigrated to the United States from Kuwait when he was 2 years old, had gone to the local high school, had gone to UT Chattanooga, wound up learning that one of our officers had stopped him for DUI, marijuana, probably about 3 months prior to this incident. And that was probably the final tipping point for him, because he came from a very religious family and, basically had downloaded a lot of propaganda of these foreign terrorist stuff and whatever, and had practiced quite a bit, was done a lot of prep, a lot of site surveys. Dad, who still to this day works for the city wastewater treatment plant, we know that he used his dad's ID to go into several buildings to scout him out. And he was supposed to have a second shooter with him that day, and who chickened out at the last minute. So, but it was very purposeful. That's why it was so frustrating when initially the FBI would not acknowledge what it was. It took them 6 months to do that.
Meaning, we talked about this off air, but meaning that designated as a terrorist attack.
Yeah. So,
well, one thing I want to make sure our audience understands, through the story you mentioned several different regulations that law enforcement has to follow. The bad guys do not have to follow any of that or protocol. Yes. They know they're leaving right then. They don't care. And for what you guys follow those regulations and put yourselves out there, our public needs to understand what a sacrifice every law enforcement officer is making during that time by following those regulations, and to get their feedback afterwards. Well, they should have done this. You shut the hell up, and that's what people need to understand. Tip their hat, thank them, and move on.
And that's a great point. So we would do a debrief for like at the following in service for our department. and I encourage any officer, because we had a lot of folks that either previously or currently were in the reserves or whatever and worked out of that building, knew people that worked in that building. And there was some frustration, like, why didn't you just run in, And I encourage them to ask the tough questions, challenge me, whatever. And then when I would walk them through my mindset in that moment to include how we were trained, I said, we know now, right? We will do single officer deployment.
Not then.
But not then. And so, and our rules of engagement for civilian law enforcement versus the military, completely different, right? Like, so we can't do covering fire. You can do directed fire, but you got to know what you're shooting at, and you got to account for all your rounds that you send down range. So your backdrop's important too as well. So we were in the middle of a park, so like right in close proximity, there's a big playground and stuff like that. So there was plenty of kids on that park that day and stuff. So,
well, I want to go back to a few things, but one, you mentioned not being able to ram vehicles and do pit maneuvers and things like that. And I've been in a situation before in law enforcement where we had to make that call. And you mentioned this to leadership. We wrote it up as a use of force because it was like, it's not a pit maneuver. It's not whatever you want to call it. I don't care. It was a use of force. I understand it's not in the manual. So what in that moment, if it's like your life or bad guys, like screw that noise. Right. And obviously you guys did a lot of self-restraint that day. Back then it was 4-man end of story. That's how we trained. I don't remember who said this quote. You hit on it, but the quote itself is, we don't rise to the occasion, we fall to our training. And that's so true, and it's so real. I did so many things in law enforcement. I was like, where did that come from? And it was like training like 4 years prior. You mentioned tunnel vision. I want the audience to understand that is so real. You do not see anything that's not directly in front of you. Auditory exclusion, you mentioned. If people don't know what that is, like literally your hearing shuts off. If you watch the body cam footage from Covenant and you see Rex out front with his rifle, he's not hearing a word Mary Craig is saying to him. Like, he doesn't hear a single word she says. That's just real. Auditory exclusion is real. These are all things the human body goes through in that moment, that also changes your brain chemistry, not in a good way, especially, but you're so locked in the moment. It's kind of like when you said you got back to the car and like, well, I'm going to get the dog and go to work, and it finally hit you like, no, I'm not. Like, I need to pump the brakes and take a me moment here for a minute, because you'd kind of blown past that, right? Like, it hit you for a second, and then you just kind of blew right through it and went to, well, screw this is my job, and whatever, I got to do what I got to do. And then it all kind of starts slowing down again. And so, which explains your words to the chief. And I'm sure you didn't mean that personally, but that's what you felt, which is true and honorable and right to feel that way. I don't blame the governor for wanting to come by and talk to you, of course, but they don't understand. They just know, hey, we had an active shooter, a terrorist attack at a base, and these guys went and dealt with it. That's all they know. And they're not, and we haven't done a good job on the mental health side of things, which is kind of where I want to go next. Aftermath wise for you, what was that like?
So, given the nature of the investigation, normally an officer involved shooting down at the city of Chattanooga, you would take a couple of sleep cycles before you would interview. But the FBI took the lead on the investigation, and there was no debate about the use of force, right? It was completely justified. And there was enough time to decompress. Like, by the time, if that happened at 11 in the morning, we didn't interview with the FBI until probably like 7, 8 that night.
Okay.
So we all gave interviews, and checked that box off. Did a diffusion, right then, in the critical incident stress debriefing model. And then went home. Automatically, everybody that was, directly involved like that had, by policy, 7 days off. No questions asked. You just go home. Did not sleep that night one bit. You keep replaying it in your head. And then wearing out the phone. So, like, the one thing I didn't say, so when we got to the service center and my imaginary friends walking me in, I told them I had to stop for just a minute. And we're in the back parking lot, and I leaned over, put my hands on my knees, and then I just let out a blood-curdling scream. I knew what I was doing, and I knew why.
Sure.
I don't know if I freaked him out or anybody else, but I just had to get that energy off of me, having been through a previous officer-involved shooting and not having the support, but also on a personal level, working on just mental health stuff for myself. I already had some awareness as to, hey, this is not going to be dealt with overnight, and so I would follow up with sitting on my balcony, calling people, close friends of mine. For me, I really needed to know all the pieces of the puzzle. And so asking people what they saw, what they did, all those type of things. And it would take a long time to kind of piece that all together. I would go see a mental health professional, a traditional one, sit in the chair and let's talk about it. I wanted to do that. I wanted to kind of work through it. And I don't know, we did like 8 sessions. And he's like, oh, yeah, you're fine. Literally, I think it was almost about 2 years later. There was 2 things that were profound for me. One was a really good friend of mine that pulled up to me. We were working, and so I'm in uniform in a marked patrol car, and he pulls out to me, and he says to me, he goes, "How you doing?" And I just started bawling, crying. And he's like, "What's that about?" But in a supportive way. Like, I mean, he knew. And I said, listen, as the president of the FOP, I said, I'm helping officers that get in trouble, discipline, all this type of stuff. They keep coming, right? Like they just, it's just life. And I said, I am now realizing in this moment when you asked me that question that I'm trying to save those 5 men that I couldn't save that day. So that was the first clue,
Sure. And this is 2 years later.
Yeah. And then my imaginary friend and I, my wife, go to a movie. It is the movie Sully, where he lands the plane on the Hudson. And, thank goodness that the theater lights were out. So my wife's on one side and he's on the other. And they go through the cockpit scene. Had a complete physical reaction to it. Literally shaking. I mean, it's shaking like a leaf. But I knew what was happening in the moment. I knew it was that life and death, right? Like flying an airplane and being in a shootout, what's the comparison? But it's that making those life and death decisions.
Yep.
And it was in that moment, I'm like, I need help. And so I reached out through the FOP for a resource in Chattanooga. And it winds up, I'd never heard of it before, but it was rapid resolution therapy. But it's just reprogramming the brain so you can still have the memories, but not relive it. And the fascinating thing for me was because I'd already started doing presentations on this incident with the FBI, with law enforcement conferences and stuff. And every time we would play the in-car camera, I would have, most people wouldn't know it, but I would have a physiological reaction while it was playing. I was getting worn out, because I was going through it again and again and again. Yep. And a good friend of mine that I would do the presentations with from the FBI was a great resource because he had a different perspective. He processed the crime scene with his team for over 10 days. And so it's that, more the instant impact versus the cumulative impact of stress. And so we would have some great conversations about that. But so anyway, I meet with this therapist. She doesn't once ask me like this story. She's just like, just starts doing things like that. They're wild. But as far as it's all verbal and, things like that. And we go through 10 sessions. And I'm like, oh my God, man, I don't get this. But so I come in on the 11th session and I sit down and she goes, tell me what happened that day. And I'm like, oh. So I talk her through the whole thing. And she's like, what are you feeling? And I'm like, nothing. I still can, right? I can elicit emotion from it, but it's nothing like what it used to be. And I'm like, well, what the hell did you do? Like, it was just voodoo or what?
Yeah, right.
And so she it's far beyond my pay grade, but she explained what it is. And so made a world of difference for me. The two things that made a difference are close friends that you could be open and honest in sharing your thoughts, not be judged, and then getting professional help, assistance to move you along, and then you start talking to other cops and you realize, oh, you're not alone. You're not unique and having these impacts on you. It can be different for different people, right, in the same situation, but I've seen guys that they hold on for dear life because they're not going to talk to a professional. They're not, they're just going to,
we can handle it.
Yeah. They're going to white knuckle it and it usually doesn't work. And I'm like, I'm not going to be that guy. Yeah. The chief, who he was still the chief at the time, and this was about 2 years after, he goes like, hey, within 5 years, the science says you're going to be out of the industry. I gave him another cuss word. And I'm like, not this guy. I've already been down that path.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big proponent of taking care of cops, and first responders. The reality is there was a lot of firefighters, and EMTs and paramedics and all sorts of people that responded that day, ready to do whatever they needed to. And it's not about me. It's not about, any one group. And people ask me, like, I never wear any medals from that day. whereas Grover Wilson does. Grover, and I asked Grover about it, and he's like, I want the young officers to ask the question, what is that medal about?
Yeah, good point.
And so he asked me, he's like, why don't you wear them? I go, number one, it was not a successful day because there's 5 families that lost their loved one. And we did our job. That's what we signed up to do, and it's not about me. And I just personally refuse to wear it. And that's just my choice. I don't hold it against anybody if they do, but, it's, we did our job. And I think for those of us in this profession, we, if you truly know why you do this job, it's hard to explain to people that you're willing to put your life on the line for someone you don't even know. But I always say, like, I don't have to be a cop, but I do it because by proximity, my family lives in Chattanooga. My friends live in Chattanooga. I'm not going to ask someone else to step up on the line and protect people and not be willing to do it myself.
Yeah.
So
lead from the front. And you answered my question. I was going to ask you for advice for somebody else listening to this that's been through something, and you gave exactly, which I thought you would. I guess where I want to kind of close with is, you talked about a lot of things in detail that day. For you personally, if you could go back and change something, whether that's equipment placement or that's vehicle placement, whatever that is, I'm sure you've replayed this 8 million times in your head. So I know you've thought about this, but young officers or people that are like-minded that like to stay prepared for the unthinkable, all that kind of stuff that we deal with every day, what would you change?
This is a question I've asked, even nationally, when I would wrap up our presentations with the FBI, I would say, if anybody has something that they could tell me that I could have done different that day and still be alive, I would love to hear it, please. I want to learn, right?
Sure.
And I have yet to this day to have anybody provide me that nugget of information. Now, the reality is I wish our active shooter training was further evolved than it was at that point, right? Whether it was single officer deployment, bounding overwatch. These are all things we do now, right? But,
sure.
But even then, how would that have changed this scenario? Would I have just been another casualty? I don't know. But I will always say, and my wife will kill me when I say this, I would happily be dead right now if I could have saved even just one of those 5.
Sure. It's what you signed up for.
Yeah.
Right? That's what, yeah. And a lot of people don't get that, I think. But, I also want to hit on the fire and EMS and all the people that process the crime scene and stuff. And that's another thing that gets lost on so many people, trauma's real. I talk about it in our training. Mental trauma's real. You can act like it's not all day, but whatever. You can be Billy Bad A, blah, 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 blah. The reality is people that experience mental trauma are 15 times more likely to take their own life. That's the reality. That's what the data supports. We've got to do a better job of supporting mental health for first responders, EMS, law enforcement, even physicians, medical. Everybody that gets, they get traumatized literally every single day. And you can say, oh, you get numb to it and all that other stuff. Okay, maybe. But maybe not, too. We talk a lot about covenant, obviously, because our relationship to that. But, I talked to a paramedic recently from the fire department here in Nashville that responded that day. He's been a paramedic for 24 years. He's seen it all, right? Mm-hmm. He was in inpatient mental health treatment for 3 months after that.
Yep.
Because mental trauma is real. And you don't know which piece is going to be. Like for you in that moment of hearing the very distinct sound, and for people that have never heard that, it is a very distinct sound. They do that to us in training so we know what that sound is, because in the reality, what do you think gets to you first? The report of the gun, actually the pop, or the bullet? Well, the bullet always gets to you first, so you need to know what that sounds like. But that's, to me, it was a very profound moment for you to just okay, but you processed it super quick, okay, well, that's what it is, then, I'm going to go down a pile of brass or whatever, mm-hmm. which was what your mindset was, right. Which is phenomenal mindset too, by the way. And that's not in everybody either. And I think a lot of that is a testament to the amount of things you did and the different units you worked in and the different high stress scenarios you'd put yourself in. You got to think in reality, the one guy you talked about, and you're not going to name him, but that's not the guy, right? People that do jobs in law enforcement that that are higher stress and put yourself in more tactical, whatever situations you want to call them, you're going to be better prepared for that day. There are cops that go work patrol day shift their entire life. God love them. I know, like, you do you, but is that the guy you want with you in that moment? Probably not. Like, it's also the guy that shoots twice a year at in-service and never touches a gun range again any other time. So I like that you said nothing different, because in talking to so many people, they second guess themselves forever and ever and ever and ever. And at the end of the day, there's nothing you could have changed. The reality is you were in a tactically inferior position based on everything you've told me, and running towards a building with the guys on the inside and you can't see what you're running into and there's shots being fired and that kind of weapon system, like, yeah, it's not a good day for you.
Well, and the other thing that most people didn't think about was I was more concerned that we were going to take incoming fire from the Marines.
Yeah, amen.
Not knowing at the time that there was only one person in the building that had a key to the armory, and they had no way to access it quickly.
I bet that's changed.
It has.
I bet a lot. I bet a lot of that has changed.
Yeah. So,
well, I appreciate you coming in and doing this. I mean, I knew of the story because of Stephen, right? Your friend we keep talking about. But I didn't know the story. You know what I mean? And it's pretty profound. I think I think I can speak for Tom and I both, but I won't speak for him. I'll let him say his own piece in a moment. But I think what you did was remarkable. I think the decisions you made were remarkable in the moment. I think, you know, a lot of people like the Monday morning quarterback and they love nitpicking law enforcement. And I get it. I think something that people don't understand is law enforcement doing their job has never been pretty. There's just cameras everywhere now. Yep. Law enforcement using force has never been pretty. There's just cameras everywhere now. Like, people have to understand, like, these guys sign up for a job that is thankless, that is crushing on your soul and on your body, and they do it anyway. And it is not, you know, it is an admirable career. And I understand everybody's had a bad experience with a cop. Me too. But understand that most of these people are just like Sean sitting here, and that they do this because that's where their heart is. It's sure as heck not for the money. Have you looked lately at what these guys make? My God. It is a thankless job, and it has only gotten worse over time as far as being thankless, in my opinion. Yep. But just like the guys that you talked about that were being obvious, they're like, I wouldn't be a police officer now. I mean, you know, it's always transforming and it's always changing. But thank God there are people that are willing to still stand up and do it, because, you know, people, the whole defund the police and all that crap. I'll think, okay, hit the brakes for a minute. Think about, give me 10 days with no cops. And what do you think is going to happen? Like, my God, like, you're just not thinking through this. So I appreciate what you did that day, your willingness to come in here and talk to us. And I'll let Tom say his piece before I close out here.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's all we can all say after that when we don't put ourselves in that role, and to your family and what they go through. And it gets so infuriating to us when we hear from the public on, you know, trying to Monday morning quarterback, and it's hard not to just assault them. Yeah. I mean, to be quite honest about it, it's
don't y'all say in Mississippi, don't y'all say slap the taste out of their mouth?
Yeah,
and as you normally say,
ahead.
Instead of assault.
Yeah, slap the taste out. So,
yeah, no,
thank you to all of you.
No, yeah. I appreciate it, and I think, you know, the thing that's profound for me in these situations, I'm sure for Covenant, right? You find out who's willing to show up, who's going to walk away, and who's for real, right? And that is, for me, that is the gift of going through this experience.
Yeah, well, sure, absolutely. Yeah, and it's you can call it battle buddies, you can call it a trauma bond. But I mean, they're the same thing at the end of the day. But now you know without a doubt that we're not all wired the same, and that's okay too. Yeah, it's fine that we're not all wired the same, but just knowing after a critical incident who you really want to see show up and who you don't, there's a lot of value in that too, especially because you're still in it, and you're obviously a glutton for punishment. I mean, you're in it and an agency head, but you're still in the town that you were involved in. And I hope, and I don't know, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but welcome to the podcast. But I hope your guys know this, like this story, like, and you know, that work for you now. And if they don't, I think it's worth them hearing it. Or if you don't want to sit down and talk to all of them about it, I would encourage you to have them listen to this because I think it's important. I mean, they know you, and I'm sure they know you well, smaller department and leadership, and you lead from the front and all that, but you just never know what kind of stuff people got hanging on. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so you may have one under you that's hanging on to something that doesn't want to, for whatever reason, and might now, you know, and there's other really popular podcasts out there that encourage this stuff a lot too and are making a difference with that, especially in the military community. So, you know, not just because it's our podcast, but I think it'd be good for your guys to hear that, you know, may or may not be hanging on to something, but I know the ones we interfaced with down there were great. I think you got a good bunch, and I think a lot of people are going to benefit from this. So I appreciate you coming up and doing it.
No, thank you for the invite.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
And hopefully we'll be back to Chattanooga at some point sooner than later. That's going to do it for this edition of Tips, Tactics, and Tools for a Safer Tomorrow. As always, you can reach out to us with guest ideas or just show ideas in general. You can also reach us at info@tipstacticstools.com. And find us on all the social media. You can also reach us at either website, herringtechnology.com or defensesystems.com.
I'm out.